When it comes to my favourite series, my top two answers have, for a long time, been Fire Emblem and the Xeno series. As Nintendo's two flagship JRPGs, rest in peace Mother, I have always gotten a ton of enjoyment out of these games. Well, the good ones at least. However, there is another series, not made by Nintendo, which from time to time will take my attention away from Fire Emblem and Xenoblade, and that is Bandai Namco's Tales series. Sorry Sakura Wars, perhaps if you had more entries available in the West? I have always loved the Tales series for its entertaining characters and robust battle systems. Nearly all the entries in this 25-year-old series are all quality games that are worth your time if you're a fan of action JRPGs like Xenoblade Chronicles. But as for today, I want to talk about where this amazing series started, with 1995's Tales of Phantasia for the Super Famicom. The game that would go on to create one of the biggest RPG franchises in Japan would originally begin in the early 90s as an unpublished book called Tale Phantasia, written by Yoshiharu Gotanda, who was a programmer for the small video game developer Wolf Team. The story was a passion project of Gotanda, who had taken influence from Norse mythology, as well as the works of Michael Moorcock and H.P. Lovecraft, to create a three-part narrative around three different protagonists and their relation to the being known as Daus as he succumbs to evil and commits atrocities. Upon showing the novel to his colleagues, the team was interested in adapting the story into a game, as the studio was facing weak sales from its current lineup. Due to a declining relationship with their parent company Telenet, Wolf Team would seek out a new publisher for Tale Phantasia. They would originally pitch the idea to Enix, who had a history of strong narrative-driven games, as seen with the Dragon Quest series. However, they would refuse, and instead Wolf Team would end up getting Namco to publish the game. Namco was a strange choice for a publisher, as unlike the Bandai Namco of today, the publisher was more well known for their arcade games than story-driven JRPGs. Regardless, they would offer to publish the game, and with that, development for Tale Phantasia would get underway. Despite getting a big-name publisher for the game, Tale Phantasia's development would be rough. Namco would take on a very hands-on approach, demanding large changes to the game, not least of which was the changing of the game's name to Tales of Phantasia. As a result of the changes, the first act of the story would be scrapped, and the second part would be merged into the third part, which would now be the main focus of the game. As a result of these changes, almost the entire head staff at Wolf Team, including Gotanda himself, would leave, with Gotanda and other members going on to form the developer Tri-Ace. With so much of the team abandoning the project, it seemed like Tales of Phantasia was doomed to not even make it to store shelves. However, Namco was determined to get the game published, and would get one Eiji Kikuchi to direct the game, along with renowned manga artist Kosuke Fujishima to redesign the characters with a more anime aesthetic. With the game's development back on track, the game would finally come out on the 15th of December 1995 for the Super Famicom, and the world will get its first look at a Tales game. By the way, yes, I am going with the GJAP SNES fan translation of Tales of Phantasia, and I am aware of its, let's say, liberal translations that can result in some colourful dialogue lines. Anyway, let's get into the story. The story begins with a great battle between four heroes and the evil sorcerer Daus. The heroes are about to be victorious when Daus makes an escape into a time rift, in which we get the opening credits. Emerging on the other side of the rift, Daus is ambushed by four other heroes, who immediately imprison him in a tomb sealed by a pendant. To be honest, I only knew about this because I read the synopsis. For anyone playing this in English, this part makes no sense. 10 years later, we meet our protagonist, Cress Albane, as he is summoned to talk with his father, Miguel, about the pendant he received for his birthday. However, before Miguel is able to finish, Cress's friend Chester Burklight shows up to go hunting with Cress. Miguel tells Cress that they can talk later, totally not going to regret that decision, and with that, Cress and Chester head off to a nearby forest. In the forest, the two spot a boar and lay chase, losing it around a large dead tree in the middle of the forest. Chester goes off to find the boar, while Cress stays by the tree when suddenly a girl appears from the tree, begging Cress to save the tree, and with that, Cress sees a vision of the tree in full bloom, before the girl vanishes. Chester comes back to find an awestruck Cress, and wonders what's wrong with him. Suddenly, the town bell rings, signalling danger. Rushing back to town, the two are horrified to see their homes in ruin and their townsfolk murdered. Cress rushes to his home to find the dead body of his father, and his mother limping out of the house to tell Cress to go find his uncle in the town of Euclid before dying in his arms. Classic JRPG, killing off your parents to start your adventure. Cress then finds Chester mourning over the loss of his younger sister, and tells him that they should head for Euclid. However, Chester refuses until he has properly buried the townsfolk. Cress reluctantly leaves Chester and heads for Euclid, where he finds his uncle, who lets Cress stay at his place. However, during the night, Cress is betrayed by his uncle, who hands Cress over to some black-dressed soldiers, who drag Cress off to a nearby castle. At the castle, the soldiers' leader, Mars, confronts Cress, and is revealed to be the one responsible for destroying Cress's village, before he then steals the pendant and throws Cress into the dungeon. In the dungeon, Cress is able to break a hole in the wall and escape thanks to a mysterious woman's help. However, upon escaping, he only finds a dead woman's body with a sword embedded into it. Jeez, can we calm down with all the death in the first 30 minutes? Taking the sword, Cress breaks open another cell with a girl locked inside. The girl reveals her name to be Mint Undernade, and asks Cress if he had seen her mother. Realising the dead woman from earlier was Mint's mother, Cress decides to lie to Mint and tell her that he did not see anyone else, and with that the two escape from the dungeon through the sewers. Escaping the castle, the two are soon ambushed by monsters, and Cress is knocked out. When he comes to his senses, he finds himself in the home of Trinicus D. Morrison, one of the 4 heroes who sealed Daus. Mint is also there along with Chester, who had met Morrison while he was burying the townsfolk. Morrison is horrified to learn that Cress's pendant has been stolen, and rushes off to some nearby catacombs. Theorising that Mars is there, Cress, Mint and Chester rush off after Morrison to get revenge. Arriving at the catacombs, the three are just in time to see Mars use the pendant to reawaken the imprisoned Daus. Mars then demands that Daus obey him since he released him, but to his surprise, Daus revealed that he had manipulated Mars the whole time to find the pendant and break his seal. Daus then obliterates Mars and his men and is about to obliterate Cress and the others when Chester interrupts him and Morrison activates a spell, sending Cress and Mint back in time to find a way to stop Daus. Much like with Xenogears and Xenosaga, Oni Black Mage has done a nice recap of the entire story, and I again recommend his video for the full plot. Being a late Super Famicom title, Tales of Phantasia is a well-polished game and looks/feels a lot like other late 6th generation JRPGs like Dragon Quest VI and Final Fantasy VI. Much like in those games, you will find yourself going between towns and dungeons as you make your way through the story, fighting monsters and bosses as you go. Just like in Final Fantasy VI, you will traverse between these towns and dungeons using a giant overworld made to look pseudo 3D thanks to the Super Famicom's Mode 7. While in the overworld or dungeons, monsters will randomly attack you and begin battles. Again, very similar to other classic JRPGs. However, I'm not the first to complain about how the encounter rate is way too high in this game, with my character barely walking 2 steps at some points before another battle begins. This can definitely get annoying. However, in this game's defense, due to its unique battle system, fights can be extremely quick, with some regular fights lasting less than 20 seconds. As a result, progress is not really slowed down too much by the encounter rate. When it comes to the game's layout, the only unique thing to mention is the food bag system, in which food items obtained throughout the game can be placed inside for a slow healing effect while in the overworld or in dungeons. Throughout the story, you will follow Cress and his allies Chester and Mint as they journey throughout time to save the world from the evils of Daus. Along the way, the two will be joined by other members. Klaus F. Lester, a scholar who is trying to form pacts with the spirits of the land, and Archie Klein, an upbeat half-elf mage who rides around on a broomstick and is probably the most iconic character in this game. Now, you might have noticed a discrepancy between the character designs and their in-game models. This is a holdover from the original Tale Phantasia, as due to time constraints, the original character sprites would be used instead of making new ones to match Fujishima's character designs. This would later be fixed in the subsequent re-releases of the game on later consoles. Altogether, Tales of Phantasia is an impressive looking game, but in terms of layout it is nothing special compared with other JRPGs of its time. Instead, it's the battle system that is truly this game's standout feature. Tales of Phantasia completely revolutionises the JRPG genre by abandoning the traditional turn-based formula found in so many other games of its type. Instead, the game goes for a full-on real-time battle system based on classic 2D fighting games. Wolf Team would call this the Linear Motion Battle System, or LMBS, and would be the basis for all future Tales games. Battles take place on a 2D plane, with you and your party on the left and the enemy on the right, although occasionally the enemy will spawn behind you to ambush you. From this point you can run up to the enemies and attack them using an assortment of attacks until either all the enemies on the screen are dead or your party is wiped out, in which you will receive a game over and be sent back to your last save point. Being a real-time battle system unfortunately means you are limited to controlling just Cress. Cress is able to move left or right using the D-pad, and by holding the Y button you can choose which target to attack. Cress can then run up and perform a regular slash attack using the A button. If the player holds up while attacking, Cress will instead do a stab attack, which can do more or less damage depending on the enemy and the weapon Cress is holding. The type of slash or stab attack will depend on Cress's distance from the enemy. This can result in attacks feeling kind of random, with some attacks involving Cress jumping before an attack, during it, or not at all. The result of this can be very annoying, especially with some small and flying enemies being easy to miss with certain attacks Cress makes. What is also annoying is how Cress will run all the way back to his starting position after a strike, leading to a lot of time in battle being wasted with Cress running back and forth. Along with these regular attacks, Cress also has access to a plethora of skills that will consume tech points, or TP, to use. These are split into long and short range skills that can be assigned to 2 of 2 slots depending on their range. To use a skill, Cress can either press the B button to use the first skill, or the up and B button to use the second. And depending on Cress's range from the enemy, he will then either use the long or short range skill set by the player. If Cress uses enough of one skill, he will eventually master it, and by mastering multiple skills, Cress will unlock the ability to use combo skills, which are powerful combination attacks. Unfortunately, much like with the regular attacks, skills can also end up being quite random, in the case when you use a skill on an enemy that's at medium range to you. Attacks aren't the only random thing in this game. Guarding is also random. The chance of your character guarding is determined by their agility, and this can make or break some fights where failing to guard 1 or 2 attacks could mean the difference between life or death. With you controlling Cress, the responsibility of controlling the other characters falls to the AI. This too can make battles somewhat random, with the outcome dependent on a party member using the right spell. However, here you at least have some indirect commands. For starters, you can move the party around using the shoulder buttons, and by opening the menu you gain access to some direct commands. Your first option is magic. This allows you to get specific characters to cast specific spells. The second is tactics. This is where you can subtly adjust the AI settings to make the other party members more or less aggressive. The third is formation, in which you can rearrange your party layout to keep weakened fighters away from the front lines. And finally, the fourth option allows you to use in-battle items, with a time limit preventing you from immediately using another one. Unlike in other JRPGs, healing items are percent based, with items such as apple gels healing 30% of your character's HP. This means early healing game items don't become useless like they do in other games. Despite the usefulness of a lot of the game's items, it can be quite annoying to use them due to the long delay between using them and getting the item's effects, with several occasions of me using a healing item only to die before its effects could take place. Getting back to the main party, you may field 3 other members at any one time, along with Cress, and each of the 4 companions offers a different playstyle. First up is Chester, who, like Cress, cannot use magic, but instead is able to use his bow to attack from range with suppressive fire. Second is Mint, your party's healer, who can also cast supportive spells as well as magical hammers to stun the enemies. Third is Klaus, who relies on summon spirits recruited throughout the game to unleash powerful magic attacks. And finally you have Archie, who being a half-elf is able to naturally use magic in a wide variety of forms, from weak fireballs to powerful thunderstorms. While battles for the most part are not too hard, they can sometimes turn south, and in those cases you'll need to run. Unlike other turn-based JRPGs, rather than just selecting a run option and hoping you'll escape, in Tales of Phantasia you instead need to get to the edge of the screen and hold the corresponding shoulder button until the run gauge is full, in which the party will escape. This makes running from battle relatively easy and prevents those cases where you run into a powerful enemy and then can't run because your character's run chance is too low due to the enemy's high stats. And that about wraps up the battle section. It's pretty clear that this game's main focus was on its innovative battle system. Even with the slow item effect times and Cress's somewhat random attacks, I still love the battles in this game, and that can also be attributed to this game's sound design. Composing the music for Tales of Phantasia would be Motoi Sakuraba, one of the few surviving members of the original Wolf team, along with Shinji Tamura and Ryoto Furuya. Sakurai would later go on to compose the music for nearly every main series Tales game, and playing this game you can easily hear the soundscape that would go on to define the series. Even in his first Tales game, Sakurai brings forward the series' iconic 3-part musical score, where the music changes between the 3 acts of the game, although here is mostly just limited to the overworld themes. Along with the overworld themes, Sakurai would also compose some amazing battle themes, such as the regular battle theme Take Up the Cross, and the now iconic Fighting the Spirits. But music aside, the big thing Tales of Phantasia brings to the sound department is its use of voice acting. This monumental task of getting actual human voices on a Super Famicom was so taxing that the game was only one of 2 to use the 6MB cartridge, the other being Star Ocean, made by the former Wolf Team developers in Tri-Ace. This allowed the characters to yell out their attacks like a shonen anime, making battles more engaging. But the big thing voice acting brought to this game was the opening song, Yume wa Owarani, The Dream Will Not End in English, sung by vocalist Yukari Yoshida. The impressive feat of work is unfortunately somewhat ruined by how compressed the vocal track has to be to fit on the Super Famicom cartridge, with Yoshida sounding like she sang the song through a telephone call. The song would be rearranged and re-recorded for the later releases of the game on the PS1 and PSP, with singer Yumi Yoshida supplying the vocals instead. However, despite this version being superior in sound quality, I personally like the more upbeat version used on the Super Famicom. Yume wa Owarani would be the first of many Tales opening songs, and much like the Xeno ending songs, it's a part of the game that I love. Trying out this 26-year-old game for the first time, I can definitely say that I've had a lot of fun. Tales of Phantasia is definitely a well-polished game and avoids a lot of the archaic game designs old games are infamous for. I have also been impressed on how many series norms were started here, from mastering art through repeated use to the use of the Sorcerer's Ring, which would become a series staple later on. The fact that most items and spells have remained practically unchanged since their inception here is another one of those many norms this game establishes. Despite feeling quite familiar to modern Tales games, Tales of Phantasia also has some features that make it feel quite alien to the rest of the series. The plot revolving around time travel is something that the series has never really tried since, and the combat too can be quite foreign. The whole distance aspect to attacks makes inputs feel random, and there isn't really any comboing attacks into one another like we'll see in the later games. At the end of the day, the biggest flaw this game faces is the hardware it's on. The Super Famicom was not built for such an action-packed JRPG with such a cinematic scope to it. The voice acting is compressed beyond belief, and what could have been amazing cutscenes are instead limited to simple sprite interactions. However, new hardware was on the horizon, and the introduction of new disc-based consoles would give the Tales series a chance to make a more cinematic action-filled JRPG, which is what we'll be talking about next time, when I come back to talk about the second main series Tales game, Tales of Destiny for the PlayStation 1.